Welcome to Leapcast. I'm your host, Dr. George James. Leap stands for leaders, entertainers, athletes, and performers. And I'm on a journey to connect with high achievers and highlight their unexamined human moments. Tune in to learn how these high-achieving Leap individuals were able to reach their greatest potential, face their most difficult challenges, and embrace the human moments that helped them along the way. If you want to get the episode highlights directly in your email, then head to theleapcast.com right now to subscribe. Everybody, welcome again back to Leapcast, where we talk to leaders, entertainers, athletes, and performers. I'm Dr. George James, once again, your host. Today, I have the opportunity to bring on another good friend and awesome, amazing person doing fabulous things out in the world, Tasnim Sulaiman. I'm so used to calling her Taz, but she is so awesome. And Taz, I'm excited to have you here on Leapcast. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Yes, because we go way back, and so this is like it's an honor. First of all, because it feels like us just being able to catch up, which is hard to do when you are like friendly colleagues and stuff like that. So
no, definitely. I feel like I've been catching up with lots of people and learning more about people that I've known and connected to, and it's just great. Right. So what we like to do is something called a Leap Story, where we just really learn more about your journey and, where you started to how you even got to where you are right now. And then we'll talk more about, what you've been doing, what you've been up to. And so I'm really curious of how did it all start? So for everyone to know, right, Taz and I, we've been connected, both therapists. We both have done some work at similar places. We support each other, and she's gone on to do some really great things. One of those things that we'll talk about is Black Men Heal. But tell us about the beginning days, even before maybe you got into therapy or helping other people. How did that all start for you?
Yeah, I think, I definitely one of those people that feels like I found a career that's perfect for who I am. Like, I'm not who I am because of the career, because I kind of feel like I always had that therapist thing inside of me, but it wasn't formulated, it wasn't articulated, it wasn't clear. And I had started a path I was originally going to go to law school, actually. Okay. So when I was in undergrad, I never really knew what I should do. I was like one of those people that took forever to declare a major because I was unsure. And people used to always tell me, like, when I talked, I would be passionate and persuasive is what they would say. So I took what people were saying and I was like, okay. So I did like debate stuff. And then sometimes people would be like, oh, you should be a lawyer because you always have good arguments. Like you have like things like people listen. And I was like, oh, okay, that sounds okay. And so I had started the whole process of like researching law schools, and I was gonna become a lawyer, preparing the schools I was gonna apply to. And what happened was I've also been in therapy a lot since I was a child, because when I was a kid, my father was incarcerated, and the trauma of him kind of being taken away, my mother made sure to take us all, like we all had family therapy.
Okay. That was familiar for you.
Yeah, it was familiar for me. So like the idea of therapy to me was never like that stigma thing, because it was normalized from a very young age. And so I had always been through therapy. So around this time, fast forward to in college, I went to the student counseling center because I had just been like, dealing with stresses and just being unsure about what I wanted to do.
That's what you do. Let me go talk to somebody.
Absolutely. And then the therapist there suggested I take like one of those like career assessment inventory type of tests. I took the test, and the results of the test was like, it had 5 results based off of my personality. The results was therapist, social worker, counselor, psychologist, or nurse.
Just like all the same, and nurse.
They're all the same except nurse. And I was like, I know I didn't, I might queasy around like blood and stuff like that.
Right. So cancel that was easy.
I was like, eliminate that. But I was like, the other 4 are exactly the same thing. And I was like, that makes so much sense though. Wow. And it was just, I was actually very happy that I had that, because I completely just pivoted the process of applying to law schools, because I was like, I never thought of that as a career, but I was like, it does make sense. And the things that people were saying were also applicable to being a therapist. Just, like being able to, like, I was like strong in convictions. And so people tended, like, I always gave people aha moments, I guess is what they was always saying. And so I'm glad that the course changed, because I think I would have been a very unhappy lawyer.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. And, shout out to all the college students trying to figure out where you want to go. Or maybe you're not even in college. Maybe you took a break, or maybe you're working and you're trying to figure out that next point. I love some of those assessment tests, because they really can help you to say, okay, this is direction. And oftentimes it helps you to see things that you might have already felt and already been thinking about. And
Right.
and the other side, what I really appreciate what you shared, is that sometimes people see our gifts, our talents, our intellect, and will put us in a certain box or a certain place that could be the right fit, but oftentimes might not be, right? They saw all those wonderful things in you and said, all right, lawyer. And, maybe that's not it. And who knows? Maybe you might still go
Right.
law, but right now that's not it.
Right.
So,
That
so
ain't
you
it.
made that pivot. Then what happened from there?
And then from there, I went straight through from undergrad to grad school. I went to Temple for counseling psych, and immediately was just like, oh, this is exactly what I want to do. So I had always been, I say like therapy. The course of being a therapist has been one of my biggest gifts in life, and I say being on both sides of the chair. Like I feel like a lot of how I've evolved as a person and who I've become has been therapy, but being the giver and the receiver. So I'm of course I'm biased, but I'm a
Right.
huge advocate of it. But I started, grad school, went straight through, and I've probably worked in like every facet of therapy. Like when I first started, I was working with children and families
Okay.
at Children's Crisis Treatment Center, doing outpatient managed mental health care. I realized very quickly into that I hated it though. And for a while I was like, damn, did I choose the wrong
Mm-hmm.
thing?
Mm-hmm.
But I had to learn and differentiate that no, I did not choose the wrong career, but being in that type of setting was not for me. So
Right.
I realized 2 years into like full-time work, like I went from undergrad to grad school. Out of grad school, I'm working for like only 2 years into the working world. And I realized I don't want to work in this capacity. I'm not a 9 to 5 person. So
Mm-hmm.
I realized that I had an entrepreneurial spirit 2 years in. Like I've only put in, I'm 40. I've only put in 4 years into the 9 to 5 world. Like I have been out of the 9 to 5 world most of my life and career, because I'm a entrepreneurial therapist, I guess.
Mm. Look, I can relate, and we'll talk a lot more about that. But I do appreciate you highlighting that sometimes we can be in the right field or specialty or career, but the wrong application of it, the wrong job, the wrong fit. And sometimes it can be easy to jump to that conclusion that like I messed up. I shouldn't have done this, and maybe I make a huge pivot versus maybe it's just not the right fit. And so I'm
Mm-hmm.
wondering, like in that moment when you were in those jobs and it didn't feel good, how did you handle that? Like, who did you talk to, or how did you handle those moments of maybe some uncertainty that came up?
Well, you're gonna like this. It's funny because like we know each other, but I know that you don't know these stories.
No, I don't.
I would like to give a special shout out to somebody who's very special to both of us, Dr. Steve Treat from Council for Relationships.
All right.
He played a big part in the pivot, right? So, okay, so I'm working in the field for, like full time. I was like doing outpatient mental health care for like 4 years. And then I was like, I can't do this. So then I've also done wraparound. I've been a behavior specialist. I've gone into the schools, gone into the homes, but that was a little bit more
Literally,
like
you've
it
done
wasn't.
all the different
I've
jobs
done
there is.
all, I've worked with juvenile offenders, like almost every job except DNA, drug and alcohol, I have not
Okay.
done.
See,
That's
I did
like,
that part. So
oh,
together
okay.
we check them all.
I used to work in the internal psych, the psych ward. So I had done all these different roles and I was doing wraparound, but I did come to recognize and realize during my time as working with children, the way that I pivoted into knowing that I wanted to work with couples is because when I was working with children, I always felt like it was working from like the outside in. I felt like, you know, the parents was the ones who really needed to make the change because kids have so little agency over their lives. And I felt like, like parents were dropping off little Billy and be like, I'll pick them up in an hour fix. And I'm like, this ain't working. Like, no,
Right.
like it's not, if you're sending Billy back to the same environment and none of the adults or the environment around them is wanting that change or feeling like Billy's the identified patient, how could you really make a change? And so I started to recognize that I would have preferred to work with adults. I also just talk and relate better to adults. I don't really do well with coming down in language.
Yeah.
I like to just talk like how I talk, like a real person, right?
Right.
And sometimes that's not fitting for children.
Right.
But
I get it.
so,
I can relate. Like I realized early that like even though a lot of people wanted me to work with their kids, that wasn't. And I would still do and expand my range, but I loved more of like late teens on. You get the single digits, that was somebody else. So I totally understand and relate to that.
yeah, like, so, I mean, some of the stuff is always good because it's like you don't know it until you're like, oh, it's not for me. You have to experience something to be clear about the fact that it's not for you. But so I started to really enjoy the idea of like, the concept of like, maybe if people had healthier relationships,
Hmm.
like, the kids that are suffering, I'm like, healthier people would lead to healthier relationships, and healthier relationships would lead to healthier children, right? And so I became interested in the idea of like relationship stuff. I used to always kind of study relationship stuff. And I had also started a business during this time. I was doing like those in-home like sex toy parties, in-home
Okay.
sex toy parties.
Yeah.
And when I started that business, I was doing it as a therapist, right? All this stuff is gonna come together. I'm gonna pull it
I
all
know.
together.
No, I know it is. I always
Um,
believe it is. So that's why I'm always interested in the story of how people get to where they are because it always adds up. Even if it feels like the pieces don't look like they're connecting, they do connect.
yes, and I'm so glad you said that because like where I am now, people would have thought like, oh, you had this master plan. I'm like, I did not have a master plan. The universe is putting things into your life and it's all conspiring to come together
Yeah.
purposefully. At least that's what I believe. But so I was doing these in-home sex toy parties on the weekend. I was a therapist by day, and on the weekends I would go to
Throwing
these
parties on the
women.
weekend.
Yeah, I'm doing these slumber parties at night. And
Was it
that
good?
really
Was the
was
business
fitting.
good for you?
Business was amazing. I made way more money. The house that you're looking at,
Uh-huh.
I literally bought this house as a single woman at age 27 because of that.
Nice.
Um, that business was so much better. And but it was also feeding again the entrepreneurial part. So, like
Okay.
again, I'm learning these things about myself that I'm like, on the weekends, I am, maybe doing 2 or 3 parties. I'm having fun with all of these amazing women, and I'm learning so much at these parties because I did my parties different. It's like I want to be I want to do psychoeducation about this stuff.
Nice.
I don't just want to sell products. So I started to really dive into intimacy because so many women at the parties were telling me about how they, 40-year-olds who were telling me all this stuff about their marriage. Like I'm trying to sell the products, but in the end, I'm having these mini sessions because people
Yeah.
are opening up, like, and talking to me about the fact that they struggle with intimacy and orgasms. And so I was like, oh, wow, it's a lot here.
So
So
you were
I
doing
started
sex
to,
therapy basically.
I was doing sex therapy, right? And people would refer me. I never actually really had to do marketing in that business because the people who would be at the parties, they did the marketing. They'd be like, I know this woman that could do your party. Yeah, the sex therapist lady,
Yes.
because I would tell them I was a therapist. They gave me the title. And I was like, that's a good title. I never even knew in my journey of therapy that that was a thing. Like sex
Wow.
therapy was a thing. Um, Never knew that. I was like, I kind of like that. Like, how would I make that official? Started to do a lot of research for the party. So I started, like, all the stuff we had to read at council and stuff like that. I had already dove deep into that research and reading and learning to be better prepared for the parties for the woman. So anyway, I started, researching counsel for relationships. And then one day, Steve Treat came, Mount Airy Learning Tree. He was doing like a talk for Mount Airy Learning Tree. And I came, and it was about like couples. And I went to that and listened to him. I was blown away. He is amazing. And Dr. James can tell you more about this amazing person. And I don't think he even knows this. I have to tell him how pivotal he was in this, but I was a magnet. After that, consider me a magnet. I'm like, wherever he's at, I need to be there. I knew that he was embodying everything. Something was like radiating in me, like with him. And I talked to him afterwards and told him how, I really wanted to work with couples. And I had already researched CFR, and he was just like, so he told me about the postgraduate program at council. And then the rest is kind of history, where, that's how I ended up there.
There's a few different parts I love. One, how you did research for your business, right? That you had the slumber party sex toy business on the weekends on the side, but it was doing well. You understood your customer, you paid attention to their needs, and you learned more so that you could be a better business person for them. And it sounded like that helped you to throw even better parties, and then you would get referred. And so, sometimes people think like, oh, I'm just going to try this, I'm just going to do this on the side, and like that's all it is. Like, but it's work, and it's research, it's looking at articles, it's figuring out what is your niche, what is the thing that makes you different than all the other people doing slumber parties. And it sounds like you figured that out. I have this angle of being a therapist. I also understand how to connect with people, how to have fun, how to talk about intimacy and sex, and do it in a way that really works. And I'm gonna inform them. I'm gonna give them information because they want more than just the toys. They wanted information. They wanted to fix it. So I really love that you did that and you were able to do that. And once again, it talks about your entrepreneurial side, right? And how you really think about business and your customer. And then I totally agree with Dr. Treat. Like, he's done those things for me. I've like followed him probably all over the U.S. In his talks, and how he takes concepts to really help people. And there is a way that he just radiates, this like whatever he's saying. I want to hear more, or I want some of that. And that has significantly impacted me in my career. So I hear all of that, and I just want to give you props for like just hearing how you manage your business part in that early part of your life, and then how you see something that you want more of, and it sounds like you go after it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's been so many different things like that, in the pivots, right? And everything has taught me how to be better for the next phase of my life. Even though when you're in one phase, when you're in your day to day, you're not realizing that. But when I look back on it, or when I have moments like this, when people are asking me these questions, I'm like, this all connects. It really all
It
makes
does.
sense. Yeah.
So you go to the postmaster's program, you start to learn more about systems, therapy, maybe intimacy and sex. What tell me about that? How does that inform your journey?
Yeah. So then that journey led me to start a private practice. And so, which I love. Like therapy has been such a joy. Like, I was one of those people who like love being in sessions, love learning about people, being challenged, and like so much would click about just people and myself, because we're just like our clients, right? Like, I mean, you're learning about them, but then there's these light bulbs going off about you, like, wait, do I do that?
Yeah,
So that was
all the way.
great. I started, first I was with a group practice, and then branched off on my own in private practice, and it was going great. I was seeing a lot of people, what wasn't going great or what started to simmer in the pivot into Black Men Hill was, also during this time I had learned from working with couples. That is how I learned that I loved working with men. So that is the pivot there. Working with couples was fascinating for me because I learned so much about myself as a woman in relationship with men, and some of my pitfalls as a woman in relationship with men. But men that came into therapy in the couple, like I originally felt like I would be biased because I'm like, I'm probably going to overly relate to the woman, right? But what was happening was the opposite. Like I was like having all of this empathy and compassion for the men, and I felt like they kept wanting and trying to explain themselves, and just recognizing that they communicate so differently than women, and that women use so many words and so much language, and they take up a lot of the space even unknowingly, right? And that they would complain, oh, he's not saying anything, right? He's not sharing his feelings. And every single time a man in therapy tries to share, like, because he talks differently. He doesn't go into the direct. He might talk in these stories and then his buildup and then these metaphors, and the women go diving in, and they would just cut him off. And I'm like, you're saying he doesn't, take any space, and you don't allow any space. So I started to have those fascinating moments. And also I love that my journey has been very different because, the concept of like, yes, I have had some wives or female partners dragging their partner in, but more so than not, in my experience, and maybe this was universe again conspiring, I had a lot of the men who were the ones being at the forefront of we need couples therapy, and the woman being the one who kind of had to be like the dragged in partner. And so I'm glad that happened too, because it taught me that I really enjoyed learning like through this male lens. It really stretched me as a therapist, because when I worked with men, I realized I needed to alter in some ways, in the ways in my approach. And I always felt like they were teaching me all of these layers and levels of depth that I did not have access to as a woman in relationship with men, but as a therapist to men, they were letting me in. And I'm like, oh my God, like these men have a lot of feelings about stuff. Yep. And who would know? Because, I've recognized that I have been just as socialized and conditioned into these ideas of masculinity as men have been, which is that men don't share their feelings, or men are not very vulnerable, or like, and I was just so wrong about that. So started to love working with men.
No, I really, appreciate you highlighting that. And, that was kind of my entry point into mental health and to therapy, is working with men. My first, client was working in a jail with, a guy who was incarcerated, dealing with men who were dealing with drug and alcohol, dealing with men from all walks of life, from, wealthy to, maybe struggling, different racial backgrounds, different sexual orientation, like just working with men in all these different types of ways. And I actually started a men's group back in my senior year of college, and for 20 years plus I've been doing it. And I've always believed this point that you're sharing, that men have a lot more to say and a lot more depth if you give them the opportunity. When I first started the men's group, we would meet and we just like, all right, maybe we'll be here for like an hour or two. Like we would be there for like 4 or 5 hours, like into like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., just talking, laughing, having a good time, which talked about the need for men to share. And I know that this is really connected to your further mission, which you even know and have experienced. So I really appreciate you highlighting that. And I'm curious, when you said that, and I've experienced this too, when you said that working with men or working with some of these couples allowed you to think about yourself as a woman and how you relate to men, is there one thing that you could share that you learned about yourself in that process?
Yes, that I'm not really sure. I've changed since then, but I'm not really sure if I was creating as safe of a space as I thought that I was. And recognizing, like, remember I told you I've always had a very powerful way of using words to like get my point across. And not really, but definitely haven't been one of those women who could take up all the space, because I can out argue somebody, right?
You
like
got words.
right. I'll never forget one day my ex-husband said to me, I remember like making a really good point, but I never argued. Like I was so powerful, like my argument was a speech. It was like a speech that deserved a standing ovation, right? I'm like, I know I won this. And I'll never forget one day my ex-husband, who's like one of my best friends now, said to me, you know, Taz, just because you're good at arguing doesn't mean you're always right. And then just walked away. And I was like, mic drop. I was like, that it was true though. I was like, you know, there's something I'm missing here, because, you know, he is not as verbal as me. And so I can win that. But just because I can win it doesn't mean that I'm right. So that was like one of my biggest revelations, to learn how to listen. To honestly, to be quiet, silence, to really receive, you know, like I was always listening, getting ready for my response. Because I'm like, oh, he just said something that's going to help me with my rebuttal.
Oh, you don't even know.
Okay. I'm like, he's setting up the trap. He made it easy for me. And instead, it would just be listening and learning how to hold space. And also learning that, like, you know, men, I feel like when they may not say it as directly, but it's like being willing to go on the ride with them as they're trying to get to the point that they're making, because they don't speak in as directly, I feel, or I want, or I need. But they might tell you this story. And I know this woman in therapy would like check out, like, my guys, I was talking about this story, or, you know, I'm like, but the story has meaning. And sometimes you got to jump on the ride with them to get to, like, it's like jumping on a roller coaster to like get to the end. And so that's my biggest lesson.
Well, I love that, and that you were able to hear that and grow from that. And I think all of us, sometimes we don't take those lessons and learn and grow. So you realized you liked working through working with couples, that you had a superpower, right? To be able to work with men in a way that maybe others didn't. So, like, how did that shape what you did, or what happened in your private practice?
Was happening also around a time in private practice where I also, like, the brokenness of the mental health care system, like thinking about, remember I said I had been in all these different facets of the system. And there was a reason why I hated to manage mental health care, because it was all around like what I felt was a part of the brokenness of the system. But the inequities that was existing, the lack of access for people of color. So I had, quote unquote, now been in every round. And I guess for a licensed therapist, right? Like when, like private practice, depending on what you want to do, is kind of like the pivotal, where now you don't have to accept insurance. It's really, you know, you're charging over $100 an hour for somebody to see you. And you can be out of that managed mental health care, right? And that felt great to have, quote unquote, made it there. But what didn't feel great was that there were a lot of people who would call me because they would want therapy, who looked just like me. There were people from my community who I couldn't see them because, and they would tell me, I'm calling you because I'm looking for a Black therapist. I want a Black therapist. And it was kind of, you know, disheartening to have to turn people away because I didn't accept their insurance and they couldn't afford my rate. So that started to weigh on me. And I felt very complicit in the broken system, because a lot of the people who, even my friends and colleagues, yourself included, I'm like, well, you know, my referral list were people who were just like me, where I'm like, we all charge a lot of money. And yes, we do reduce fees. Like, we do what we can here and there to make it work, like to support our families, as well as to still give back in the community. But for me, it was just still like not feeling like enough. And I started to recognize like, yeah, most of the Black men who I have seen in my practice are very successful. They're ball players and lawyers and doctors and judges, and they're all of these things. But I'm like, what about just like my homies from around the way, or people like my little brothers, and like they deserve the exact same quality of care and access as the person who can pay the rate. So that was all weighing on me, as well as everything that was happening in the media with men, all of the police killings of unarmed Black men, mass incarceration. I could go on that. Like there's all of these things systemically that were weighing on what I felt like was a breakdown in just Black communities and Black families, that which I feel is that the head of that is like the separation of the male from the family, right? And this goes all the way back to slavery, because there's still these elements of it, right? And so that's how it kind of started to weigh on me. A lot of stuff in the news was weighing on me at the time. And one day I just had this thought, like I remember feeling like I became very passionate about men in therapy, but also how depression shows up differently in men, and how sometimes when men, like what's considered toxic is also depression. Nobody would look at a toxic man who's exhibiting toxic traits and have empathy, because he might just be coming off as an a-hole, but really like thinking about like what is contributing to that, and how that could be depression and all these other things going on that is missed. So I had this idea one day where I was like, oh, I feel so strongly about this. I think I want to start like trying to get men in therapy. I was going to use my own Instagram to be like, I'm going to give a pro bono spot or two. I wanted to do like a social experiment to a man, like, I was going to be like, for a man to come to therapy, right? And hoping that I could like highlight it to share for other men to take the space. And then I was like, oh, that would be dope. But that might help on a micro level, like that I could help one or two men. Yeah. But then I started thinking, I wonder if there's other therapists who might also be willing to just give an hour or two of pro bono just for that. Then we could that could help on a macro level. So that's how Black Men Hill was born. I was out.
And before you go further, just to this point, I really want to highlight the 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 multiple layers that you just shared around the impact of Black men, right? Like when you talk about what we learn around masculinity, around race, and oftentimes we'll hear how for many Black men it is even harder to talk about feelings and what you go through, but yet expected to perform or show up or deal with injustice, racism, and all the things that are out there. And then how you talk about from the clinical therapeutic side, which I really appreciate you highlighting, is that part of it, even as a person of color, even as a Black person, that you're trying to get to a place where you can make enough that you can take care of you and those you care about. And in order to do that, that often means you have to charge more, right? Me included. Uh, but that also means somebody gets lost, or some people get lost, and it's a really tough conflict for clinicians of color. And I've dealt with that and had to try to face that in lots of ways. Of what is the part of me, and this is from my background, that is about mission, is about service, is about providing for other people, but also still providing for my family. And so when you talk about that, and it sounds like that burden was heavy for you, that like, I don't want to do this anymore, which probably meant that that was a significant like decision, because what if what if I give up all this time and energy and that impacts me financially, or what if I give up my practice or shift my practice? So I'm wondering about that moment, and then we'll go into like Black Men Heal to hear more. But tell me about that moment, that decision, knowing that it may or may not work out.
Yeah. I think I have to say, like, I've had the safety net for me was I never, well, now I've taken the deep dive, but I took like a part of myself. Like, I didn't have to take all of myself. My for 2 years we operated Blackman Hill with no money, no funding. And it was my private practice that could sustain me, that to allow me that. Now the result is, I mean, you already know, Dr. James knows, George knows, like, my time, it didn't exist. I had no time because I'm working, quote unquote, full time to make a living, but I'm building an organization, right, that I love and that I believe in, but there's no money there. And it's all, I call it the labor of love, is what Blackman Hill started out as, because there was no money, there was no funding. I didn't know anything about that or how to get it, but I was still sustained. So I will say that I was blessed because I could still support my family and pour into, take my income and pour into some of those beginning things that was needed for Blackman Hill to get it set up, right? Just from my own money, because I didn't know how to get money or raise money. I was like, I don't know the nonprofit world. I had been an entrepreneurial from like a business, a for-profit business, right? So I think for me that it was less of that conflict. So I can't say that I took like, oh, I quit my job and then I did this. I just work like you would not believe, that I still look back on, and it's kind of traumatic to think like how, like when I think of the level of like how I used to not sleep or come home from work, getting done with clients at 8 or 9 and still had a daughter and would be up until like 3 in the morning, just working on things. When I think of it, it's kind of traumatic to think of how much work I really took on. But I will say that God had a plan, because I don't think I could do it today. But at the same time, I'm looking back, I was like, just 2 years ago and I did it. So
it's not far, but that is the sacrifice, right? Like, and I'm glad that, right, you had the job and that helped and sustained you. But I think that this happens for a lot of people when we're going after purpose, mission, the vision, the thing to help, is that there is a sacrifice, and sometimes it is our time and our energy. Sometimes it's family. Sometimes it is giving up of that job. And I know from even some of our conversations, like you're sharing now, like you put like your everything into creating this organization for Black men, and that just talks about how much you believe the importance of it. And so, I would love to hear more about Black Men Heal as you started it in the beginning, but where it is now, what you're doing. I know you didn't maybe know how to fundraise then, but I think you sure do now. So so how tell us about how you've navigated all of that while really cultivating this organization to help Black men.
Sure. So I mean, when I start talking about Blackman Hill, I start cheesing because I'm so proud of it. It's my baby. I love it so much. It's just such a special journey. It's a special mission. But so let me give you a small snippet of what it is. So Blackman Hill is a nonprofit organization that eliminates it's a solution to a crisis, a broken problem, right? And we eliminate the 3 major barriers that would otherwise not create the access for maybe marginalized communities or specifically men of color, which was our initial target, to receive quality healthcare by a clinician, a culturally competent clinician. So we eliminate costs. All of our services for men are free. So we went around and asked therapists who were all busy would you be willing to donate an hour a week in your busy schedule for 8 weeks? Because we offer them in 8 free sessions. So I like to say we jumpstart their healing journey. So that's what our individual therapy program does. It's like the men have to just be ready and they apply, but they get 8 free sessions. So it's also an element of recruiting therapists who can provide these services for the men. And we recruit specifically, we're looking for, Black and brown therapists, because the other thing, so cost is one of the barriers that we eliminate. The second thing, after you do the research and figure out, okay, why are people of color 20% more likely to have a mental health issue, but significantly less likely to be able to receive the care? And one of those reasons is the hesitancy of not being able to find a provider that you feel like can relate to your unique cultural experiences, right? Because if you call on the back of your health insurance card, it's just not a lot of us, right? There's only 4% of Black psychologists, and there's a whole lot more. Like I have not been able to get this number. I don't know if you know it. I've been trying to figure out, have they researched how many like master's level or license level, because that stat that they give, that 4%, that's just PhD level. Like, but I'm like, but there is so many more significantly of us who are licensed master's level.
Yeah.
I don't know what that percentage is, but you know, and that's where we kind of focus at as well. But because there's not a lot of us, it's hard to find. You know, they say it's like trying to find a Black therapist is like like a purple unicorn. Yeah, where it's hard. It's hard because we're all full. Like every time I go to refer to one of my friends, I'm like, ain't nobody taking clients. Yeah. We're overwhelmed in a system where like the demand, like we can't meet the need, right? So coming through Blackman Hill, you're guaranteed to not just get a therapist of color who's culturally competent, who can relate to you, but we built a system, a proprietary system that allows matching. Because what I had learned as a therapist was the therapeutic relationship is the highest indicator of effective outcomes. But just because I'm Black or we're Black doesn't mean that, we're not a monolith. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that it's all going to be a perfect match, right? Like earlier I mentioned, I've never done drug and alcohol. So I'm not the person, people tell me about every problem in the world. Oh, you're a therapist. I'm like, I don't even do that. Right. That's not my area. But we hone in on 8 unique variables that would indicate a high likelihood that the client and the therapist is going to have a good match. And so that's one of the things I'm most proud about, because it is such a unique system and we've been hitting it out the park with the matchups. Like, so we factor in personality. It's so many different things we factor in to make sure that the men are going to really like hone into the match. And the therapist. Our therapists love their clients just as much as the clients love their therapist. Well, 97% of the time, which is an amazing number.
It is. I think that's awesome, because I know like a majority of my clients, I care deeply about, but there are some clients where I'm like, this might not have been, the best fit, or like, or you kind of force it and then over time it works out. But I love that you have a system, that you've been doing this and that you care so much. And I guess I'm also curious, as we're getting close to like, wrapping up, like how have you been able to expand and grow? What started off as like, let me donate some time, or maybe let me get me and my friends to donate some time, and then like now into a full organization. And as you mentioned, then you took a deep dive and now you're all the way in. How did you get it to this place where it continues to grow, it sustains folks? And I believe at one point the therapists weren't paid at all, and either that changed, or maybe they get a little.
Once we started getting funding, so the therapists now are paid. So any therapist that's listening to this, yes, it's a great organization. You will love it. So we do pay the therapists now. So the way in which we started to grow, I think the need. People keep saying like, I didn't have a magic formula. We just kept working, planting the seeds. And it was unique because also there's not a lot of organizations or advocacy around just the men, right? Like, you're talking, and this is that time where, everybody's talking about mental health also. And more men, more celebrity men, I guess are talking about mental health, and that helped also. But what I'll say really took us to the next level was 2020. I had, didn't know how to fundraise. I remember on January 11th, 2020, we had a fundraiser, and it was the very first time I had like the fundraiser. I was like, my goal was raising $3,000, and that was the most I had ever raised for Blackman Hill, because it had all been just done off the muscle. And
what's
3
it
weeks
now? What's the
after
most
that,
you've ever raised?
we are now at over 750,000 raised since 2020. So I mean, that's only 2 years. That, you know, I think by the end of this fiscal year, like actually, yeah, like by the end of this fiscal year, we would have raised $1 million. Because I'm gonna just go ahead and speak that because of something that I know that's
I'm gonna even add to that, you know, like I hope that people recognize that if you feel like you can't do some of the work personally, that you can do the work with financially or even both. Right, that my family and I have been able to donate, and it was what we had, but we want to donate more, and I hope that more people donate, and that you go over the million, because there's so many men, in terms men of color, black men, who need the service, who need the support, who need the safety, and that you need the people who are doing the work to not have to worry, because that adds additional stress, and when there is a service and the finances, it makes a difference. So I agree with you with the million plus that you will have raised
let's
as you
speak it
move
in.
forward.
Yes, it will be a multi-million-dollar organization next year at this time.
Yes.
And that is just unheard. I mean, in 2 years, like my nonprofit journey, I went from 0 to 750,000 soon as we had the access. And, you know, so I do have to give a shout out to Charlamagne the Guy, who definitely helped us to leverage, like when people, it's just access. The same problem that people not having access to this as a small grassroots organization, it really is just about access and opportunities, right? Where no one knew that we existed. Like it was a lot of people here in the city of Philadelphia who I went to, who was not answering the phone or giving me any time of day. But we wrote an article in the Enquirer, and like 3 weeks after that fundraiser, and I guess somebody tagged Charlamagne in the article. He read it the same day he read it. He called me and was like, "This is amazing. How do we bring something like this to New York? Come on the show." He called me on a Saturday, and at the time he called me, it was only 2 people left on the team, me and my COO, Zakia Williams. At that time, we were wearing, when I say every single hat, I still can't believe we did it. We were still operating, but there was just 2 people, and the weight of that was just so heavy. And I was like, we don't have an infrastructure to go on the Breakfast Club. It's a national platform. We're going to get slammed. And people were like, "Are you crazy? You don't
you
say,
can't turn that down.
Wait until I get some things in place. I don't have an assistant."
Right.
We went on the Breakfast Club, and things really just exploded, because that is such an incredible platform. And I'm so grateful that he gave us that platform. Things exploded. And then a month later, the pandemic hit, right? And Charlamagne was the first one to donate like major money to us. He donated $10,000. And then from the show, we asked people, hey, if people would just give $1. I mean, because when you're operating in a deficit for 2 years, $1 feels amazing.
Yes.
And the general public started cash apping us $1, $2, $3, $4, $5, and the messages with those $2. I know this isn't much, but I was watching this with my boyfriend, and it really resonated, and he really wants to try therapy now. And thank you so much.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was emotional. It was emotionally gratifying to know that our community was supporting this, right? And giving whatever they could. And so then their $1, $2 donations grew into like another 12,000. And then the pandemic hit. And as we all know, people's need for therapy, actually, people seeking therapy on Google increased by 130%. And so we were already overwhelmed, like, but pandemic hit, and now, yes, everybody. And so now we started getting slammed because so many people, of course, so many more men wanted to come in. But the good news is, unfortunately, also during that year of March, what started happening, of course, we all know, like Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, the racial riots, all of that stuff. Now, like, the world was on fire with this racial injustices and inequities. And so corporations started to really have to step up, like, because around that time, You couldn't be an organization or a corporation and you are not in alignment with this mission or doing something to help. So at that point, people just started to find us. Like, so a lot of our, funding has come from private corporations and partnerships and private foundations. And I must say that they all, because I didn't know, like I've learned so much more now. So now I do a lot of the seeking myself. But at that time, it just came to us because you started to Google, you want to help Black men in this problem. What's coming up? Black Men Hill. So
And
people
because of
are
all the
finding
things
us.
you've been doing and the
Right.
platforms you've been
The
on,
work.
it increases where you land on a search, which is great.
Yeah.
I look.
So that's how it's been exploding since then. Just exploding. I mean, some of the opportunities and things that have come about, I had it in my vision that maybe in 5 to 7 years we would be here, not in like 2, right? Like I had it in my vision that like, oh yeah, like we'll start to earn a little bit of money. I didn't know that, like, within a year and a half, we would have raised over $700,000, or like that the journey is moving so much quicker. And I think that's happening because of the need. And it's allowed us to build a team. I have an amazing team now of 6 people, and we have at this point, over 60 therapists. We're operating in 8 states, and we're still scaling up. And it's
8
been
states.
amazing.
I love that. I
Yeah.
knew that the expansion, but to hear in multiple states and to now really impacting the model and across, the country, or even expand into that, which is really amazing. And I love, right, like once again, sometimes the work we do, the passion, not just we, but people in general, that sometimes it is a labor of love, and it just stays a labor of love. Uh, but there are times where it can grow, and you get to the place where you can help other people live their mission, right? To have 60 therapists in 8 states says that there are people who believe in the model, in the mission, in what you're doing, which I think is just great. By the way, that's the reason why I was wearing my dope Black father shirt, right, to connect with Black Men Heal. I'm going to get my Black Men Heal shirt, right? So I know
Oh
there's
yeah, we
merch
gotta
out
get you
there.
some merch. Yes.
I gotta get my merch, so I gotta work.
Yeah.
But this is my closest association. I try to connect. Uh, but I think everything that you're doing is great. And there's a couple questions I want to ask as we kind of wrap up. One, what are some things that you're working on now, right? Like, so I hear the expansion, I hear the growth, I hear the mission. What are you working on now?
So it's a couple things I'm really so proud about that we're doing now. What we've been working on now is we're growing. Like we're developing. I'm developing myself as a leader for one.
Nice.
So I'm a part of this. There's an amazing organization foundation called Stand Together, and they have this Catalyst community. And what they do is they go and vet some of the most top performing nonprofits in the country to see, and they invest in the leaders. And so they like teach you everything you need to know, which is, I'm so grateful for. They only accept 9% of the organizations that they vet. And we got accepted for that. So currently I'm in that leadership development program, and just getting so much. And then we have like a business coach that's helping us. And like, as we're hiring more people, talent acquisitions, like we have experts who are like helping us along the way with everything. That's amazing. Also, I had this amazing opportunity. We're working on just policy changes because our one of the other reason why we have been successful in this funding is because our data has been destroying the game. 75% of our men are continuing on with therapy even after the 8 free sessions in. That's been incredible. During the pandemic, we built a virtual space, a virtual group called King's Corner, which Dr. James will be hosting.
I will.
So there's over 1,500 men across the globe who've been signed up for that. And so King's Corner's numbers were like, the volume of the numbers were exploding, and what the men were getting out of that. We're building new programming going into 2022. We're about to start our first programming for women. It's going to be a group called Heal with Him. And we are doing youth. We are doing youth groups this year also to address some of the violence that's going on in the city. We're going to be working with youth whose family members have been affected by violence. And also we're in a partnership with the Mayor's Office of Black Male Engagement. We won this opportunity to the Satcher Institute, Dr. David Satcher, the Satcher Institute, and the Morehouse School of Medicine. They have paired up to find across the country community-based organizations who are partnered with policymakers to go through. We're also going through a 2-year program training with them. It's called the Political Determinants of Health program. Yeah. So we're building programming. They're funding us to build the programming along with the policymakers that is going to be sufficient for evidence-based treatment for people of color. And I'm so excited about that. We're working on.
That's awesome. And I'm familiar with.
And two things I'll tell you off the grid. That.
And I want to hear it too.
Yeah, because I can't speak it yet, but just amazing, just amazing.
There, and it's coming, and I love everything that you're saying. I love the expansion, the family, those connected to the men, King's Corner, which I will be a part of, and I'm excited about that. And I'm familiar with Dr. Satcher because my wife is in public health, and he was a part of a series called Social Determinants of Health, and what happens around race and class, and especially with what you're doing, mental health. All right, a couple questions as we end. Who would you love to work with or work with again that you, maybe someone you haven't worked with or someone you would love to work with again in some of the things you're doing?
I would love to, well, somebody who we kind of are connected to is Dr. Alfie. She's doing an amazing job in the field also. But I am my personal person who I look up to the most is Michelle Obama. I would love to work with the Obama Foundation and the work that they're doing because Chicago is one of the places we want to scale out to. Nice. So yeah, I'll put that out. Yeah, I would love to work with the Obama Foundation.
Okay.
If you're listening,
the Obamas and the Obama Foundation, Black Men Heal. I think that would be a great addition to the work.
Great synergy. Doing. I think so. Yes.
I agree too. Last 2 questions. What does mental wellness mean for you?
It's a good question. To me, mental wellness means freedom. It means free. I'm thinking of it just more viscerally, but it feels, even to say it, to take a pause and to take a breath. It's when your mind is not racing with all of the things that have happened or could happen or should have happened, or your responses are based off of more not reactivity. They're not coming from this place of threat or flight or freeze. Mental wellness is healthiness. It's being the ultimate level of healthy. And right now I feel like I'm probably the most healthy I've ever been, but it's everything encompassed. It's all of the holistic part of wellness I see as mental wellness.
No, I love that. And you had to go through the journey, do the work, and go after what I call purpose and mission. And that has allowed you also simultaneously to be at your healthiest. Last question. What mental wellness advice would you give to your younger self? And that could be as young as yesterday or any time in the past.
That's a good one. Mental wellness advice I would give to myself. There's probably so much. To know that pain comes in floods, one that is just a part of life, that it comes in floods, but it can be temporary, and that pain can even have purpose. And that if you can hold on through your pain and learn how to regulate your emotions through the pain, to know okay, when you're experiencing pain and hardships in life, it's supposed to hurt. It's going to be difficult. But if you have enough of the skill set of learning how to be resilient and learn how to lean into those emotions and know that it comes in these waves, and that you could be more comforting and loving to yourself during the pain, and know that it can subside. It's almost I was saying this to a client the other day. It's pain is you stump stump your toe, and of course it's throbbing and it's excruciating. And when we like stop, we stop and we're breathing and we're like, like holding on to our toe, and as we're starting to breathe more, the throbbing just slowly starts to subside. Sometimes when we're in pain, we feel like we're going to be there forever, and we're going to be stuck there. But like, if you learn how to lean into it and breathe through it and all of the skills that you need, it will slowly start to subside. You might still have a scar when it's done, but but you're strong on the other side of pain. Like when you go through a fire and you come out on the other end, that you have so much more knowledge and wisdom and purpose. That's what I would tell my younger self.
No, I love that. And so significant and important, and that pain is a part of life, but there is growth and that we can gain out of it, and it could lead us to some beautiful places. Taz, I really appreciate you being a part of this podcast, and sharing here on Leapcast. I want to be clear to everybody. Black Men Heal is not a sponsor. Taz is not paying me, but I believe so much in the mission of this organization. I believe so much from the work I've done, from what she shared, that we're going to donate again and more. And hopefully, as we earn more, we can donate more. And I encourage you all to support Black Men Heal and organizations that are trying to impact people in their lives, especially around mental health. Thank you so much for being a part. Once again, Tasnim, which I'm not going to even continue to try to get that right.
Because he calls me Taz, and everybody does, so it's okay. Yes.
It's like people who like on the podcast trying to call me doctor. I'm like, just call me George. Just whatever.
Right. We knew that as Taz and George, right?
Right. That's all we know. I really appreciate you being a part of this. I wish you well and all the success. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Wow, what an incredible ride we just went on with another great member of the Leapcast community. I appreciate you listening and hope you got some tangible value from the episode. Please let us know what you think by leaving a comment, rating, and review. As always, please don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. This is Dr. George James, and I'll see you next time.